Hello, welcome to our live chat series. My name is Stephanie Rivera. I'm a reporter with Long Beach Post, and today I'm co-hosting with reporter Crystal Niebla, who will be talking with our guest, who she'll be introducing right now. And just wanted to let you know that this is about, as we're hearing protesters talk about defunding police, it's not a new concept, especially in the world of activism. So we want to take it a step further to find out what does that mean and where could those funds go to. So Crystal, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this chat. Mack Harris, I would love if you can introduce yourself and tell our audience about the Invest in Youth campaign and, what you do there.
Hi, y'all. My name's Mack Harris. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a youth ambassador with the Invest in Youth Long Beach campaign. And the Invest in Youth Long Beach campaign, it started back in 2018 when youth leaders from Long Beach recognized that the city had also has a very large in supporting young people, and not just our parents or our schools, and our goal for there was just to fight for dedicated funding to go towards youth, like all youth, not just certain youth, not just a certain percentage of youth, but like literally every single youth in our city. And we want them all to feel incredibly seen and heard and cared for. And something that we've done, one of the biggest things that I think personally that I'm incredibly proud of my campaign for doing is that we set up a survey within Long Beach, and our data was received and filed from our survey as official city data, and from 2018 to 2019. And it shows us in 2019, it showed us that 2019, our $10,500 is spent per youth on suppression, and only $200 is spent per youth on youth positive youth leadership development. And that in itself is just a very wild comparison that shouldn't be happening. And our moral and our belief is that all youth should be equally cared for and equally invested in all forms of city in the city.
Thank you, Mack. And this makes a great transition to this next question. Just the Invest in Youth campaign has been trying to redirect police funding into a youth fund for years. And are you guys now restructuring your campaign now that the idea of defunding police nationwide is being taken a little more seriously?
As of right now, yes, we are restructuring, but also as a committee, I think that we're calling, as the moment calls, for just the community to stand together with Black Lives Matter and call for defunding and reiteration on what reimagining what the system could look like, which is balanced by a budget that reflects all our values and priorities. Personally, that's really what we are currently striving for. We're also currently doing back in 2018, we got the 200K Youth Fund. We started a strategic plan, which had a basis of connecting or contacting each district in Long Beach and gathering youth from each district, one or two youth from each district, and putting them together as youth ambassadors and having them all come together and talk about a strategic plan on what good funding looks like within Long Beach. And that's something that's currently ongoing as we speak, which I think is currently a really fun experience and really informing too, especially for youth. It's really empowering at the same time. So that's one of the things that we're doing currently.
And as a young person, from your perspective, what can city leaders do to address inequities at schools, specifically for people of color, and how those experiences might be different from maybe whiter kids, such as like suspension rates, detention rates, for example, or if not from schools, but just youth in general?
I think one of the biggest things they can probably do is, in general, investing in the communities. The funding and the resources can go towards like safe housing and for literally everyone, and youth programming, youth job training, education in schools, hospitals, art. There's so many, and restorative justice practices. There's so many different things that can be used that this money that we're giving towards policing can be used for. And I think defunding the police department and investing in the youth future is incredibly important in where we're going, because there's many Long Beach organizers that have been working towards this vision where our tax dollars are moving away from the police and being invested in Black communities and communities of color who have been historically marginalized, literally. And out of all the reform that's happened, or yet hasn't happened yet, this is the solution we haven't tried at all. And how do we know it's not going to work if we haven't tried it?
Thank you for sharing. And if you feel comfortable asking this, answering this question, what kind of attitude or relationship do you or your peers have with police, especially in Long Beach?
Well, my peers and I are actually pretty intimidated by, have a pretty intimidating relationship with police, if I'm going to be completely transparent here. Navigating the world personally as a Black, queer, non-binary person, it hasn't been incredibly easy, especially when the police are around and we don't very much feel safe, which the purpose of police is to feel safe. And police are often associated with this idea of public safety. However, my peers and I don't very much feel safe, or we mostly experience safety and community within spaces that police are nowhere to be found. And that in itself shows that police don't exude safety. They incite, for me personally, they incite fear. Because we know and we know the people in our communities, we keep each other safe. And we've seen it time and time again. Our communities keeping each other safe, keeping each other going. And yeah.
And I feel like there's just a lot of people who might not understand what you're experiencing. And I'm just wondering if you can really just try to explain for those viewers who might not understand, like what is that experience? How is the Black experience different from a non-Black experience or a white experience growing up in Long Beach?
Well, I think it's blatant, though. I think the experience in general is different because Black people are just taught from a young age that they're different, and we're shown in very different ways, especially with systemic anti-Blackness. It's everywhere in our society. So we're always just taught that we're lesser than someone. And I think when people realize that Black people are in just this thought of us being lesser is embedded into society, I think they'll realize, whoa, this is really happening. They'll open their eyes, and that's the whole balancing act, because there's not, I don't see how one couldn't see the difference within the lives of Black people going through all this tragedy and literally having to watch ourselves be killed online over and over and over brutally, and without any justice, without any repercussions for the fact that, and we're being subjected to it all the time. And I think acknowledging the fact that this is traumatic, and acknowledging the fact that Black people have to deal with this and have been having to deal with this for hundreds of years, that acknowledgement in itself acknowledges that the Black experience is very much different from a lot of experiences.
I know, and if I can jump in, you kind of brought a question to my mind about, specifically maybe even in schools, you're talking about investing more in proactive than reactionary type of funding and services. How does that play out in a school setting where you have school resource officers, but some schools may not have nurses or counselors, but they'll have, these officers? How does that kind of come into play?
That plays into the fear aspect, because now kids aren't seeing that it's again in the investment sense. They have to invest in the livelihood and the mental health and like all of that. We don't have that. They took that from the youth, and instead they replaced it by adding security guards. And if they don't realize that the cops on the campus aren't showing the kids like, hey, we're here to keep you safe, they're just standing there dauntingly staring at these kids, and in some senses judging these kids and inhibiting very harsh stereotypes on these kids. And I just don't, in that, it warps the mind in seeing that this is safety. In reality, it's just inciting fear. And if we had more funding for counselors and mental health professionals on campuses, I think we'd see a lot more help being done, a lot more good being done than harm being done.
And you bring up a point about just the media, things that you see, videos, you having to watch that, and that is traumatic. And as a journalist, I did want to ask your opinion on like what we can do better as journalists to help minimize that type of harm.
Mhm. Well, to be completely and utterly frank with you, I think that journalists they need to acknowledge our humanity and the acknowledgement of actual humans' lives they're writing about. Because personally, I've noticed that journalism often like has a huge issue with discernment when it comes to how to speak on Black stories and lives. And most of the time, when we hear about Black lives in the media, it's through a statistic or some sort of backhanded stereotype, which is often incredibly steeped in a handful of anti-Blackness. So I believe personally that they need to, for one, actually seek out and recenter Black voice, like emphasis on Black voice, and not just to use it to tokenize on Black culture, but to actually give space to Black voice, as well as teaching and informing the public correctly on what's happening and has been happening to Black folks in our communities. Because journalists and reporters have a huge role in debunking the deeply attached stereotypes of racism and anti-Blackness. And I think that they should just uplift what Black folks have to, what the Black folks leading have been saying. And it's about defending Black lives and defunding the police. Echo the work Black youth and leaders are doing on the ground and on the front lines, instead of making it this like huge spotlight to exemplify the negative. Why don't you uplift the fact that things are like good things are happening too for the Black youth that are doing work?
So you mean just like consistent coverage of the Black community, have them be like any other type of coverage in any other area, such as like features, like let's write about
like
but make sure it's sincere in that sense, like make sure it's sincere and it's not what's the word, like antagonizing, I guess you can say, or condescending. The tone of it is sincere, and you're acknowledging the fact that these are people and these aren't just another written story to get clicks on. It's actual people's lives, and this is actually people's history. And I think journalists have a hard time acknowledging that sometimes.
So just like including a lot of context and historical context okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And then my last question is, you bring up the term anti-Blackness. For those who may not understand what that might mean, can you please maybe explain in your own words what it means to be anti-Black?
Yes, I actually can do that. Anti-Blackness, when we think of anti-Blackness, it stems from the term racism, but anti-Blackness isn't highlighting that racism is brought strictly to Black people and the history of Black people. And I think a lot of the time people have this fear of exhibiting examples of anti-Blackness, but I think something that people have to realize is they have to defeat anti-Blackness, they have to confront anti-Blackness. They have to confront it in themselves. They have to confront it in society. They have to confront it in the systemic businesses and the systemic, like the society that we live in is embedded in anti-Blackness. And I think when people acknowledge that and fight that, like consciously fight that all the time, and that's when we'll see a change in what anti-Blackness is, because it's the literal racist things it's the dehumanizing of Black people, the hatred for Black people. It's the embodiment of all the things Black people have had to go through within our system, and it's painful in the most blatant, transparent way. And I think a lot of people need to just realize, like, yes, you have, like, even everyone in this world has probably exhibited examples of anti-Blackness, but a lot of people have also fought that. And I think a lot more people need to fight that. So a lot more people need to, that they have. Keep going.
No, I just wanted to just clarify. So an example of that can be like, you mean that, say there's historical things that has happened to the Black community, such as, for example, redlining, where like certain people were not allowed to have houses sold to Black people and other people of color, for example, which has led to for that community to have a harder time to buy homes and like establish wealth, for example. Is that kind of what you mean when it comes to that? And okay, and just to
when we
acknowledge that, like,
I think when we're acknowledging the exact phrase anti-Blackness, I think we're acknowledging the country and its inability to recognize our humanity as Black people. The disdain and like disregard and disgust for our existence as Americans. And we want to show that it's not about any particular thing Black people have done, but it's systemic and it's unrelenting oppression. And it points to the identity that like of this country is founded on anti-Blackness. And regardless if you face racism, prejudice, and discrimination, at least you're not Black. Like that's because Black people have been told that we're literally the bottom tier. And I think, and which is tragic, right? Like tragic. And it's not really about avoiding being anti-Black. Like I said, it's about just confronting it. It's about acknowledging the history of it in this country and the internalized aspects of it that we have within us. And our society is literally just built and embedded to believe it. And I think once we break that system and that cycle, it'll hopefully, fingers crossed, not exist.
And lastly, what is the Invest in Youth campaign doing to be anti-Black?
Right now, we're mostly following the leaders in the community right now to follow what Black Lives Matter, the organizations Black Lives Matter are showing, and we're standing in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're following all of the protests and all of that. And our statement for the People's Budget will actually be released Thursday morning. And the People's Budget is, if you didn't know, it's made up of various organizations / groups in Long Beach who are fighting for issues that impact all of us, including immigration, housing, language access, youth programs, defending Black lives, and more. And so please just be on lookout and support what local organizations are fighting for in Long Beach. Because when you defund the police, you're also dismantling systemic racism, and you're dismantling a police system that upholds and perpetuates systemic racism and anti-Blackness as a whole.
And I had a question on those lines too. Is there like a certain amount that is being called to defund police, like the certain monetary amount? And if there is, is there also a monetary amount if you want to invest in either the health department, more in, libraries or anything like that? Has that been discussed?
Off the top of my head, I can't recall the exact number, so I don't know the exact number for that as of right now.
Do you know, if there's any departments that the Youth and Invest in Youth campaign hopes to see more funding in?
Yes, we are hoping to see more funding in youth investment in Parks and Rec, more than likely, and then anything that supports community programs and youth voices. Anything that supports and invests within youth, we're more than likely calling for investment within that, because youth are our prime candidacy, and we're calling for anything that helps uplift their voices. And when we say youth, we mean everyone from age 0 to 24. So it's a large window, and I think that's really what we're calling for.
And that also brings you, I know you said the People's Budget's going to be released this week.
Yes.
And in previous times, I know you've gone to the city council to talk about this. Is that something, how are you going to hope to, I think this goes back to the beginning, what Crystal was talking about, like restructuring. Can you talk a little bit what you guys are thinking about doing now because of how this is in the spotlight right now?
Well, we're hopefully going to mobilize to be able to go to city council and talk about the new things that could potentially happen, or we're going to fight for new things to potentially happen. So we're not going to just sit around and continue to wait. Because I think fighting, and since we've been fighting for so many years, what's a few more, or like not even years, we want it now, So I think we're going to continue to fight for more funding, and I'm pretty sure we're going to probably, I don't know off the top of my head, I just know that they're going to be releasing their People's Budget release statement on Thursday morning. So I do know that off the top of my head.
Crystal, did you have any other questions?
Just a last clarifying question for like wanting to invest in like the Parks and Recreation Department, for example, just so viewers can understand, like, does that mean like after school programming, counseling, so or
yeah.
Okay.
Like after school programs, like job trainings, like and anything that can benefit anything that can benefit youth life. Like, I would say anything that has to do with like internships or after school programming or tutoring or counseling, things like that. Anything that can be funded to help just youth feel like they can be youth in the time that they're youth and not feel like they have to grow up so fast. And because they're supported in their youth, like they're supported within their youthfulness, and they can do exactly, and they can be taught exactly all the things that need to be taught at adequate time and space without fear of time passing them by.
Got it. Great.
Okay. Well, yes, Mack, thank you for joining us. Crystal, thanks for those questions as well. And if viewers have any other questions, where can they, I guess I want to make sure people know, where can they go to find out more about the Youth Invest in Youth campaign?
We have an Instagram account called the Invest in Youth Long Beach. And then you can also go to our League Awards Instagram. It's My Girls in Action, or KGA, in Long Beach. And they have updates frequently on what our campaign is doing and everything like that. So that's where most of our updates are. We also have a YouTube channel. The Invest in Youth campaign has a YouTube channel. We have vlogs about our whole journey from back when we first started in 2018 to pretty sure till now, but I'm not 100% sure. But we have documentation of our journey from where we went, from when we were to where we are.
Well, thank you again, Mack, for joining us. And thank you to our audience for staying tuned with us.
Of course, thank y'all.